Welcome, Ben, to Hot Sauce. Very excited to have you join us, mate.
Great to be here.
And I'm particularly excited today because typically in these conversations on Hot Sauce, because we are talking about talent sourcing, we are bringing on people in talent acquisition and sourcing and recruitment to better understand their perspective. But we're actually talking to Sasha, who works in your talent team at Qwilr, and she suggested it could be really cool to talk to you as like the hiring manager viewpoint and also as the viewpoint of the recipient of outreach messages from talent teams. And so we could get that different perspective. Really excited to share this. And I think this is going to be really valuable for talent teams and individuals to better understand what that partnership piece looks like with hiring managers from their perspective. So thank you again. Very excited.
Sounds good.
You working at Qwilr, you're the CTO, so you've got an engineering function that sits underneath you. Got a really impressive career. Prior to that, worked for a number of years at Atlassian, kind of moving through the ranks and building teams and sitting in different roles. So hiring in the leadership roles and particularly in your current role as a CTO, hiring is it a high priority? Like getting involved in the day-to-day of hiring and partnering with talent acquisition, is that commonplace for you?
Absolutely. It's even more critical having jumped out of a larger organization to a smaller organization, because the number of hires starts off small and then starts to expand as you look towards scale. And so it just means every hire matters so much more. There's a degree to which when you're scaling, like you still want to definitely hire the right people and have the right fit, but you can hire the next person to create that next balance or fill that next need. Whereas when you're growing at an earlier stage, it's just even more critical each hire. So absolutely a huge need to be involved deeply in that process.
And do you feel that you kind of seek out these relationships? Like as a hiring manager, are you kind of proactively investing in the relationship, or is it somewhat waiting for talent acquisition to come and kind of lead with value and be the business partner, consultative kind of talent angle?
I'd love to hear the answer from TA actually on that. My best self-perception of that is that I've been a bit more proactive to build a relationship there. I think I just have a belief that it works well when both sides really understand the other side and what they're trying to achieve through each role that they're trying to hire for. And once you get to that place where you really feel there's a shared understanding on both sides, it really just multiplies the outcomes of the hiring process, and it's a little less disjointed, like stages sort of passing over fences and so on, or wider feedback loops. You can more quickly trust and believe that you're going to make a really good hire just for the next one that's about to happen.
I think a lot of hiring managers would agree that involvement and partnering with TA in process is valuable. But what we typically talk about is more upstream from there, so that top of funnel partnership. What does that look like? Like, how does that kind of that alignment occur?
I think it's really important to partner with the hiring manager and TA before hiring starts, and have that connection with sourcing. I think sometimes you're often hiring the first of a new role in a startup, or at least when you're starting to scale, which is we've had a number of times in Qwilr. So we're like, yes, we're going to hire our first site reliability engineer. Yes, we're going to hire our first program manager, product manager even. And so you're establishing a new function. Like we've done this several times over now, and it means there's a lot of, okay, let's talk about what this means to Qwilr. It's not just a case of a repeatable process. There's a lot of discovery happening around these new specialist roles and exact what size and shape they could be, what Qwilr needs, how to, from an outreach point of view, quickly zero in on the kinds of candidates that are most likely to be a good fit.
And in terms of like the nitty gritty of the execution of that, it's like a role becomes available, and it's a coming together of you with the talent acquisition partner, and really like just an information sharing. Is that kind of the first initial step where you're kind of like sharing your beliefs, like as to what the shape of the person could look like. Is that first initial meeting? Is that what that looks like?
Yes, we evolve on a bit of a format. We use Notion for some of our documentation, so it's usually a bit of a write up around not just the classic more sort of job description and roles and responsibilities and the kind of impact they're going to make, that kind of thing, which I think most talent folks appreciate from the business. But then there's all getting into that. Let's talk a bit about the nature of this role in the industry, and often there could be more than one flavor of that role. So for example, like for a product manager, are we looking for someone who is sort of slightly disconnected from teams a bit, maybe more strategic, thinks more longer term? Or at the other end, are we talking about someone who is like really closely involved with the teams? It's a bit more about execution and so on. And so being super clear on like what the role is in that spectrum, not just in terms of like, there's two sides. There's one side is like what does the company need, what does the team need that they may be working with, but then there's also talking with talent and really expressing the human side of it, of someone who maybe wants to learn this or wants to get something out of their role next would really fit well into this role. Because I think the hiring manager and the people they're connected with, it's not just what they need, it's also what they can give. And I think that's where we start to get into the more magical areas of the partnership between hiring managers and TA, where we're really finding the fit on both sides.
From talking to lots of people in talent acquisition and sourcing, that can be the big challenge. Is it can be this view that they're job fillers and they get a job description and then it's go to market for these 5 dot points. And it's like in engineering roles, for example, it gives to be generic languages and technologies. And it's like, go and find me a Python developer, and then so the intricacies of the nuance of the role, and as you said, like the human aspects get dropped on the floor because it's not articulated and communicated, and often that'll kind of get picked up downstream at interview stage. But then there's this huge amount of wastage that occurs top of funnel, also some potential negative impact to like employer brand and candidate experience. So like bringing that alignment up from the get-go, I think is really, really important. And from you, I'd imagine as a hiring manager, it's great because you get better quality candidates more quickly rather than kind of having to wait for the delay of that feedback coming through once you're in process.
Yeah, I think it's important that it's clear like hiring managers don't have it all sorted out at the start too. And just like as someone involved in tech, you know what agility means and the value of it is it's the same concept of you don't necessarily get everything just right. And so I think a number of us hiring managers have gone through hiring processes in the past and kind of looked back and maybe thought, hey, this other kind of candidate might have actually worked out in this role. You know, maybe for it's those times where maybe the hiring process was slightly more elongated and more challenging. And I think if you have a tight relationship and you're talking about these different shapes, you can start to develop a language of like, oh, so there's actually maybe 2 or 3 shapes of candidates that might really fit based upon what they're looking for, what we're looking for. And you sort of continually refine that narrative as you're checking in with each other. And then as candidates appear that maybe fall into more than one of those shapes, you can reason about it together. And I think that then from the TA point of view, it's not like they've just got this fixed brief and they're stuck to that, but they're part of they're really more part of the team of trying to help make these difficult decisions to find the best fit.
Essentially heading into harder territory here. If you didn't have this mindset, if you hadn't kind of developed this mindset over time, would you have any tips or guidance for hiring managers to try and elicit this or to try and develop that relationship with a hiring manager that potentially doesn't see the world as you do? Potentially people that are more kind of stuck in their ways and that relationship isn't necessarily a kind of a want from the hiring manager side to build that relationship. Any ways to navigate that?
It's relationship building and just wanting to seek to understand and help the hiring manager understand. They're just going to get a much better outcome if they mind meld, if they share more.
Yeah.
I think if the hiring manager is more in that position of well, I do want this, I'm just not sure how. I mean, asking for more feedback. I've one thing I'm very conscious about when I'm in a conversation with someone in TA and we're talking about we're debriefing on a candidate or something. I very consciously will pause and say, "What do you think of that?" Because I think it creates that better dynamic of partnership. And I think if there's only one takeaway here as a hiring manager is to try doing that in your debriefs and and even those kickoff conversations, is to seek feedback and make it more of a co-creation effort, a partnership.
In my experience to date in that kind of partnership piece, often hiring managers can see things that TAs potentially can't because they haven't worked in the role. They're not as empathetic to like these prospective candidates around maybe like complementary technologies or frameworks or company sizes or stage of career. Can you kind of speak more to how hiring managers, some of the value proposition around how they can, the types of things that they can see and share with talent acquisition to make their job more effective?
A practice I really enjoy is where you do just look at profiles, like you maybe have some sort of early shortlist, and that's tuning sourcing more generally, but it also creates these opportunities to say, oh, this particular profile, so they have this history in C sharp or whatever. Okay, so TypeScript, that's what this app is built in. That's actually not too different. If they're keen to get into more of that full stack web environment, they could find that really appealing. Or maybe there's something else in their profile that suggests that. So I think it's looking at those specific profiles and together mind melding over how you not judge them on the profile, because I firmly believe, in fresh minds, when the first conversation happens, it's more what are the good questions to ask to try to tease out the what they could get out of starting this exploration or relationship with us.
How can hiring managers assist TAs in the engagement piece with trying to convert these passive profiles and get them excited about the company and the opportunity that's presented to them?
Is getting out there about our culture and creating awareness, because you don't want to feel like they don't know anything about Qwilr. In my case, you have to start from scratch and explain what we think, how we approach our work, how we think about collaborating with one another, because all of those things really matter to the individual, particularly for a startup. It's like you're actually getting a life experience coming here, in addition to being part of the journey of a company. And it's a company going through like really transformative moments in a stage like ours. So I think getting out there outside of that, I blog, and sometimes it's just thought leadership for myself, but other times I'm talking about things happening at Qwilr. It's getting involved in events, and we partner with TA sometimes on that too, of particular events and so on. And having a program like that, I think, is really important to just really cut through with what is unique about our culture that you'll already have in your mind. And some of our most successful hires have been people who have already picked up on some of those things and have already had that resonance with our vibe, our culture, and that's just straight away got us going in terms of early engagement and so on. When it comes to the actual engagement, I think I'll just talk about the feedback I've got for key roles. I'm just quite happy to talk to them up front. It's more time for me. And I get a little surprised. I guess some people say, oh, I was really happy the CTO spoke to me. And I don't know, maybe that's just something that not a lot of people do, but maybe you have a shorter conversation if it's a role with more numbers. I won't necessarily do that for all roles, but I do try, particularly for critical roles, to take that extra step, because then very early on there's that response from the actual conversation, the conversation I have with talent afterwards, and a much accelerated view of, oh yeah, this person, it's really a two-way thing. Like they would really go well with us, we'd go well for them, and so on.
So trying to like bring yourself, rather than kind of appearing later in process at like a more formal second or third round, it's coming up and potentially assisting in like the initial touch point, like screening calls and pushing upstream from that.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, to be honest, I mean, 2022 was like really hard, right, for hiring. That's like an understatement, understatement. But to some degree, it was necessary. But I guess in hindsight, even though that was true, it was still quite effective. Look, roles are going to look the same. We need to show why we're different, and it's really going to have to be a particular role someone's going to get a lot out of individually in terms of their stage of life and career, for us to be, the right choice for them.
With TAs there, and maybe they're struggling with their ability to unlock outbound as a channel, like targeting passive candidates. Is there one piece of advice that you would give? And you can either answer this as a hiring manager or as like a recipient, as a prospective candidate for this role. Is there one piece of advice that you think would be pertinent and helpful for TAs that are wanting to do better?
I think it's to create a we problem and not a me problem. You've got to work together. It's got to be, this is just what's happening. Our presentation of the role, for whatever reason, might not be getting traction. Is it more of that general awareness that we need to do? It's not just about a KPI on the TA side to deliver a certain number of candidates. It's got to be more of a shared outcome, and I think developing more language about those shared outcomes, working with hiring managers, is, I think, a really good tip for TA.
Mate, awesome. That's great. Thank you very much. Some really good little tidbits in there. I'm sure people will derive a lot of value, and really, cool hearing the perspective, like your perspective. Lots of TAs will benefit from that. So thank you very much.
No worries, mate.